Hi, so I'm Honor, pronouns she, her, and I co-founded the Espresso series with my lovely friend Grace Volante about a year ago. We started off as kind of a small show which really just focused on like intellectual issues where we wanted to like historically contextualize political events of the day, and then we started getting a little bit of interest from like different groups on campus who wanted to be interviewed, and we really wanted to get more involved with campus and social justice movements. We have worked with Black Ed before, so it's super nice to be back with you guys again, so hi. And we did actually interview Shira as well for last year as well, so it's nice to see the community coming back. We mostly try and stay with putting the spotlight on other people's issues. But I recently received a diagnosis that I am autistic. Obviously that's very niche, one, because I'm a woman, and two, because getting the diagnosis of autism is quite tricky. So Shira very kindly asked me to come and speak at this event about reproductive justice and how we can improve the situation for all autistic women over the course of time. Grace, do you want to add anything?
So,
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here, and yeah, I don't really want to add much, but I'm just really grateful for Black Feminist Space and Girl Up for having us today, and I'm really excited to hear what all of you have to say.
All right, great.
cool. So, Shira, is Gola going to speak or?
Yes, I think Hani is here. If you able to speak, I'm not sure.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
No.
Hey.
Sorry, we have problems with internet, but we are here. What are you talking about?
No worries, no worries. We're just doing introductions. So Honor from Espresso series just introduced herself. And so if you could just tell us about who you are, tell us about Girl Up, Boo Up, and why it's important to just address neurodiversity in our feminist activism.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for this space. Here I am with Yukari, that is another girl from the club, Shayla and Aniela. That's their names, our team, and they're gonna have the presentation. So I would like to hear them to explain a little about Girl of Bab and our work in Mexico. So Aniela, are you there?
Yes, sorry, my internet is about quality right now, so I'm unable to open my camera, but I will try later. Hi, I'm Aniela, my pronouns are she, her. I am from Mexico, to be more specified, in the south part of Mexico, which is called Oaxaca, a place for a lot of beautiful things. I think neurodiversity is important because in general, neurodiversity people are important because here in Mexico, there is still a lot of stigmatization about them, and they are not taken into consideration for the government agenda in any other later presidents or new president, because they are taken into like the left out groups that don't never have a place, a voice for in the healthcare system and the structure or governance system. There are no laws that allow them to be part of society. So I think it's important to let the world know how neurodiversity is being seen here in Mexico and how can be changed for advocating and for activism towards groups like Europe and other kind of activism groups. I don't know, one of my other fellow Europe members will have to talk about it, Yukari or Shay. Are you there, guys?
Yeah, we're here. Hi, I'm Shayla. I'm from Veracruz. Also, is from the south of Mexico. but we study in the same university. And I think that it's so important to speak about these idioms, because here in Mexico now we are fighting for all reproductive rights, but also sometimes we forgot a point so essential, that is the intersectional points. We have many realities outside, and we have to thinking about that maybe the situation that I have is not the same that the other women that are outside. So I'm very excited to participate in this forum. It's so good for me, and I think also for my partners, and for me as here. So you got a friend here too in Mexico and in Veracruz when you want. Thank you.
I think might be the next one. Hello, my name is Yukari. Like Shay, I'm from Veracruz. Why this topic? I think that this issue for neurodiversity is a topic that will be discussed. Why? To eliminate the violence in the country and maybe open minds to another people. So I really excited to stay in this place, and no, thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, ladies from Mexico. Y'all did an amazing job. And thank you so much for coming. I'm excited to hear more from you guys. Shira, do you want to say anything before I continue?
No, I mean, you guys are doing great. It's we're so excited to learn more from you, and you have plenty of friends in Scotland and all over the world too. So I'll pass it on to Grace and Teresa to take us on.
Cool. So let's get right into it. So reproductive justice is better understood besides reproductive rights. So they're different, but they kind of stand for the same ideals. So reproductive justice corresponds to 1, the right to have children, 2, the right not to have children, and 3, the right to nurture the children we have in a safe and healthy environment. While reproductive rights is almost like a framework, which is largely centered on achieving women's individualistic reproductive freedom through the legal system, and has historically focused largely on the pro-choice and pro-life debate, sex education, and family planning. So in summary, the reproductive justice framework acknowledges the ways that socioeconomic status, gender, and race shape reproductive healthcare experiences and health policy. So essentially, to sum up, the reproductive rights framework is more individualistic and a legal approach, while reproductive justice is expansive, intersectional, and holistic. And I think one little thing that I want to bring up from our last reproductive justice session we had was what one of our speakers said. She summed up reproductive justice quite well. She said that all the factors that kind of affect or contribute towards the reproduction of a population are the same factors that contribute towards a population and how they're treated and how they live. So I think essentially from the slideshow and what we want to talk to you guys about today is that reproductive justice is for everyone and it affects everyone. So yeah, I hand over now to the Expresso series that's going to kick us off with their content.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to be talking about autistic women and reproductive justice. So just before I get started, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about myself and my journey in autism. And then I'm going to give you some background about what autism is, because I'm not sure all of us will be that familiar with it. I certainly wasn't when I got started on my journey. So my name is Anna. I'm almost at the point of having my diagnosis confirmed, but I was first picked up when I was about 8 years old by a specialist for possibly having Asperger's syndrome. I don't now use the term Asperger's because the term was founded by a Nazi called Hans Asperger's back during World War II. So I identify on the ASD spectrum, as ASD, which is the autism spectrum disorder. I would like to make one point very clear. I am not the single voice for autism, nor should I be the single voice for autism. I am what's described as, unfortunately, we don't have any better terminology, so you'll have to bear with the terminology until we, get a little further forward in the medical field, as high functioning and as a savant. This basically means that I am neurotypical passing. So you wouldn't guess that I had autism on site necessarily. But in no way, shape or form do I speak for the entire ASD spectrum. I'm only speaking from my experience. And yeah, I just felt the need to clear that up because I feel like autism is having a bit of a spotlight put on it at the moment, not necessarily for the best reasons, thanks to Sia's very, very silly movie that she's come up with. And I would hate for the entire community to just be categorized by high functioning autistic voices. I'd love for everyone to be able to join this conversation. But on that note, let's get started. Moving on to the next slide, please. So this is Greta Thunberg's quote, and I thought this really helped summarize autism very well. And the quote is, "No, autism is not a gift. For most, it is an endless fight against schools, workplaces, and bullies. And for the sake of this particular conversation that we're having right now, reproductive justice. But under the right circumstances, given the right adjustments, it can be a superpower." And this is very, very true. Given the right circumstances and given the right adjustments, it really, really could, we could really contribute to the intersectional community. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. So what is autism? Autism spectrum disorder is a broad term used to describe a group of neurodevelopmental disorders. So some people have accidentally categorized autism as like a mental health disorder. It's not, it's a developmental disorder, which means it's all about our development. Our brains are wired differently to neurotypical. So that's anyone who doesn't identify as autistic. Okay, so these disorders are characterized by problems with communications and social interactions. That is a very, very narrow definition. We will get into a larger definition later. People with ASD often demonstrate restrictive, repetitive, and stereotyped interests or patterns of behavior. This is due to many reasons. Some of them are still being found out. Some of them are it's still being worked out by scientists today. There's research in autism is just really starting to kick off now, since it was characterized very negatively before and sort of put to very much one side. What isn't said by science and what is starting to be said by social justice groups is it doesn't present the same in anyone, especially in women. And this is due for one very, very, very big reason, and it's called masking, but we're going to get onto that later. So can we just go to the next slide, please? So how does autism present in women? Next slide, please. So there are 11 signs of autism in girls. Now, this doesn't categorize everything, but this is the best diagram I could find with as many signs as possible on it. So we're just going to run through them very quickly. I'm going to explain what they are a little bit. So relies heavily on other children to guide and speak for them. So this is the idea that they look up to neurotypical children. Passionate, restricted, specific interests. Now, this is not the Sheldon Cooper stereotype for those of you who have watched Big Bang Theory. This can be anything from girl bands to maths, to bicycles, to TikTok. It's basically categorized by a number of special interests, but science has always usually categorized it within the savant bank, which is kind of like this idea that it's maths and science. It's not that, it's a lot of different things. So unusual sensitivity to sensory challenges. We do not like loud noises. We do not like bright lights. It's very uncomfortable. Clothing as well can be deeply, deeply itchy. Conversation restricted to limited topics of interest. That's pretty self-explanatory. Difficulty moderating feelings when frustrated. That's a big one. It's difficult to sometimes kind of get all the feelings to come out in a way that doesn't come across maybe overly aggressive or frustrated, or like what we would describe as maybe an irrational reaction. Obviously, that's a very loaded term, but for the sake of explaining this, that's what I'm going to try and get across to you. So unusual depression and anxiety and moodiness, I don't necessarily think this is a character trait. I think possibly it's a little bit stereotypical, but we're moving on. Difficulty making friends and keeping friends, often described as shy and quiet, unusually passivity, difficult with social communication, increases with age, and epileptic seizures. So moving on to the next slide for me, please. Okay, so why is it so difficult to diagnose? And there are a couple of women here who have written very, very extensively about this, but I'm going to run through them very quickly. Sarah Gibbs, a really, really interesting comedy writer. There's a lack of understanding about how autism can present in girls. It's often social because they're often socialized differently. Pang says that they're more likely to be described as anxious, and autism diagnosis can be overlooked since it's a challenge to stereotypes. And Gadsby, who I recommend her Netflix series, has said she may appear to be good in social situations, but that's because she's incredibly exhausted by her masking process. So we're going to move on to the next slide, which is the history section. So a little bit of history about autism. So Leo Kanner was an Austrian-American psychiatrist who first discovered autism. He described it as extreme autistic loneliness, delayed echolia, and anxiously obsessive desire for maintenance of sameness. He often blamed autism on mothers for being cold and detached, often referring to them as refrigerated mothers. Now, this is important for our reproductive justice here, because as per usual, the woman is being blamed and being said that you are causing the autism in your child because you are not giving enough, not doing enough. This is not true. It is genetic. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And even now today, it is sometimes stereotyped by certain charities as the problem of the mother towards the child. So we will get to that a little bit later. So how is it diagnosed? Well, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, so the DSM. DSM is deeply problematic for a number of reasons. It was based on men and male studies, and it didn't often include women. But to hit the autistic spectrum disorder, you've got to sort of lie along these lines. You have to have issues with communication, including difficulty sharing emotions, sharing interests, or maintaining back and forth conversation. Second thing, issue with nonverbal communication, such as trouble maintaining eye contact or reading body language, difficulties developing and maintaining relationships. Now, categories of all of those three things is that women, neurotypical or not, have to do these things anyway because of the patriarchal system that we live in. We are consistently having to mask anyway in real life. Autistic women just have to do it to a greater extent. So it's sometimes hard to diagnose girls because simply the way that we're brought up and, you know, told how to behave means that we won't present in the same way that men do. And men feel usually at a younger age that they don't have to present these qualities because no one told them to do it. And then the final thing is often autism wasn't ever categorized by autism in women, and women went undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for years, often being diagnosed with different mental disorders such as bipolar, borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety. And this was deeply problematic for the obvious reason that they tried to treat patients, female patients with these issues, and would obviously give them the wrong medicine, which didn't end particularly well. So there's that problem too. We're going to move to the next slide, please. So how is our reproductive justice being compromised? So next slide, please. So it starts at the beginning on the left-hand side, lack of diagnosis. So I've already talked about how the lack of diagnosis or misdiagnosis can be deeply problematic because that is where our issues start. Because we as autistic women need slightly different help obtaining reproductive justice and maintaining free and safe environments. So moving to the next point, masking. No, not the next slide, just the next point, sorry, not the next slide. Masking. So women will often hide their pain to maintain social graces because it's a deeply uncomfortable process, letting go of the mask. This can be an issue, certainly in terms of when you go into hospital. Hospitals are not great places for autistic people in general. It's loud, it's bright, people are consistently kind of bumping into you, the phones are ringing, they do not cater for a non-neurotypical. The environment is heavily stressful, so having a child in a hospital might cause a mother deep, deep distress. or any kind of process up to the point of actually having to go into the hospital. And for the child to be safe as well, hospital environments, really, really horrible. For me, the doctor was an absolute no-no. I'm sure none of you liked getting your shots growing up. Someone had to pin me down to get my shots in. I was not a fan. The whole process was absolutely awful. So we need to change the healthcare system for non-neurotypicals, both mothers and children. So failure in education, that is the next big one. Obviously, this is a little bit more on the reproductive rights section, but it's also reproductive justice in the sense that it's talking about how kind of there needs to be a change about how we frame autism within reproductive justice. So failure of education is not understanding sex or sexuality. Now, obviously, this is an issue across the board for anyone neurotypical or non-neurotypical. But where reproductive education is, allowed and sex education is happening, it's not happening the right way for non-neurotypicals. So sex for us is more complicated, or sex for me has been more complicated in some respects, because how we interact with the world can sometimes mean we don't like being touched. So we learn and grow, and we sort of understand that there are certain kinds of touching that, are just kind of part of the daily life, like a pat on the shoulder, a hug from a friend. But what we may struggle with is the idea of consent and what touching is not allowed and what touching is allowed, if you know what I mean. It's about the fact that it may be more difficult for us to distinguish between the different kinds of touch and sexual touch. On top of that, sexuality is a bit more of a confusing one for us. Someone who's a TikToker called Paige Laley really pointed out very recently, everything for us is a construct. So gender is a construct, but the thing is we can't even see it. So we get women present far more confusion around sexuality and sexual gender. So that needs to be addressed in terms of, bringing up a child maybe who is autistic in a more kind of like a safe environment in terms of them being able to express themselves, not constricted. Obviously this applies to everyone, but it can be even more distressing for an autistic child who doesn't understand the way that society sort of supposedly works. And there's the issue of hypersexuality. People with autism experience different levels of sexuality, but sexual behaviors have to be taught properly, because for us, it's a bit like a conversation. So if you don't know where to interject and where to not interject, sometimes it can lead to some very awkward situations where we misread the room and maybe we try and kiss someone who actually really didn't want to kiss us, and then we're confused because we thought that they wanted to. And hypersexuality is now being considered for the DSM-5. Which is the diagnostic process. This can lead to a couple of other things. Kids who are not fit, the system where kids are not taught about other non-neurotypical kids can mean that non-neurotypical kids are feeling left out, alone, being treated as an outcast. We are also further exposed to abuse from sexual predators because, again, of the issue of not understanding the difference between touch and sexual touch. And being treated the same as autistic males is deeply problematic, but that's mainly a patriarchal medicine thing that we're just going to have to deconstruct with time for everyone. So just moving on to the next slide really quickly. So this is kind of the last little bit, and this is I'm going to trigger warning this to say that this is going to talk about eugenics. It's also going to talk about kind of the attempted removal of autistics altogether from the face of the earth by some specific charities. So just moving to the next slide really quickly. So eugenics and autism, it's an attempted genocide. In 2014, the largest sperm bank in England was started turning away autistic donors. It has also been shown that families who have got autistic kids are less likely to have more children for the fear of having another autistic child because they are not being provided with the means necessary, whether that be education or financial resources to raise an autistic child. Also, many parents don't know how to raise autistic children because we're a special breed of human being. And that can be really, really hard for a parent, especially if they've never actually had a child before. I was the first for my parents, and they really got lucky with that. And the nature of society being shaped the way it is, being autistic is not widely catered for or widely accepted, making us seeming like more undesirable children. And this is where the eugenics comes in. So there is a charity in America, which is actually kind of a bit more global these days, called Autism Speaks. If you see them, I really recommend you turn away from them. They spend about 27% of their funding on creating science that will allow for prenatal screenings that will be able to tell if a child is autistic in the womb. And the end goal of this would allow prenatal screenings. Mapping the autistic genome does nothing to help autistic people in real life. Diagnoses could happen without the genetic screening. Diagnosis couldn't happen without the genetic screening, but basically it's supposed to be sort of a way of telling mothers before they have the kid, hey, your kid's going to be autistic. Do you want to terminate this pregnancy? I would like to point out I am pro-choice, and I always will be pro-choice. But I don't think telling parents that their child is going to be autistic as if it's a negative, where an option for them is to possibly end the life of the child, is particularly fair or right. That could be possibly just my opinion, and I'm coming from somewhere who's very high functioning. But I don't think we get to decide how much someone's life is worth by the terms of their, neurological skills. So that is something that is really, really awful. To talk a little bit more about Autism Speaks very quickly, it also affects children and mothers very badly. Autism Speak uses a therapy called ABA, which is known for causing PTSD in autistic children and teaching them total compliance with the neurotypical world. It removes consent and conditions for them to believe that they must obey what neurotypicals want them to do. This can range from holding eye contact to saying certain phrases to giving hugs, but has led to forced sexual activity and exploitation. Instead of trying to address the child's emotional needs and teach them healthy coping strategies, it's basically kind of, mutes them and tries to push them into conformity. So just final slide. So this is as mothers of autistic children have found that they often feel left out and outcast, not provided for the resources to cope, blamed for the child's issue and ignored by medical professionals. Especially if you're a woman with a daughter and you think your daughter has autism, you're going to be ignored by many, many specialists. And just one final slide, and then I'll be finished and we can move on. What can you do as neurotypical woman? Please include us in the conversation. That is literally the only thing I can say. I love the fact that we're here today, and I'm here today, talking about autism within the feminist community, because I think it's a new pathway for everyone, both neurotypical and non-neurotypical, and it's really exciting. So thank you all for coming and supporting. And I'm going to pass over to our guests next.
Thank you so much, Honor from Espresso Series, for that. That was so informative, insightful, and I've definitely learned a lot about how to include neurodiverse women in our activism and in our advocacy, and making sure that we're really fighting for a gender equal world for all of us and what that looks like, how to get there. So thank you for that. So now we're going to pass on to Girl Up Luop. If you guys are ready, just let us know when you would like us to go to the next slide.
Hi, we are Girl Up Luop here today to talk about some more. Sorry for that, my dogs are very loud. To talk about the university and the Mexican perspective from some our experience Sheila already has about menstruation in the streets, initiative made by her and some other things. The next one, please. Neurodiversity and education, prior products, privilege, and conservative sexual education in Mexico. That's how we wanted to name this presentation, because this is about mostly how the neurodiversity and, as the name says, in education, the lack of prior products, the privilege we have, other women with prior products have, and a conservative sexual education in Mexico that give a lot of walls onto this. The last one, the other one, please. The Mexican healthcare system in general has a huge range of malfunctions and ambiguous and poor health structure. When we talk about a huge range of malfunctions, is that we sometimes, most of the time, in every part, in different regions in the country, we don't have enough medicine, enough surgery supplies, enough money to prove the general hospitals for medication, for diabetes. I don't know, diabetes, even flus. Doctors don't want to go to our public hospitals because they don't think it's a good environment for careers. Doctors don't want to go there. Sorry again for that. Again, so the doctors don't want to go there because they don't think it's necessary. It's a necessity. Doctors don't care really about, or the public that don't have access to healthcare, and healthcare is not really interested in paying products and medicines for a population. With the Mexican population being 60%, having 60 millions of people living under poor conditions, that takes a lot. So where the neurodiverse population is not even taken into consideration, because the Mexican government has a general agenda for every year. And whenever they show up this agenda, they have, I don't know, main topics like dealing with cancer, diabetes, that is very common here in Mexico, dealing with stomach problems here, dealing with surgeries that are very expensive. They have to pay all of them, or sometimes they're not paid for the surgeries to offer populations. So neurodiverse people is nowhere near the agenda. The next one, please. So I take some of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2006, because it's like an introduction of how we realize Mexico lacks of laws that protects that protects neurodiverse people, because even though they're signed this act in 2006, and one part I really love about this one, I posted here, like the neurodiverse person has the rights holder, because it's something it doesn't happen here, because the neurodiverse people is not seen as the rights holder. Even though there are subjects, there are citizens with rights, participatory citizens and responsible citizens who assume the full and complete direction of their personal and social life. And when the Mexican government tries to approach neurodiverse people and neurodiverse issues, they don't see them as the rights holder. They don't see them as a responsible citizen, because they have a lot of stereotypes about neurodiverse people. From people with autism and Asperger's syndrome, with people with, I don't know, even more things like anxiety and mental health, because speaking for me, I have anxiety, so it's one of the things that even the government don't make sure that. So wherever we are in Mexico, we want to talk about law that proceed to protect, give rights, human rights to neurodiverse people. They don't see them as a rights holder, because they don't think they have the capacity to do it. That's how a government lacks of a comprehensive approach and a rightful approach for the neurodiverse people. The next one, please. Because it's not enough, because there's a lack of legal support. According to Article 25, access to health services that are gender sensitive, including sexual and reproductive health and population-based public health programs. This is one of the articles that are on the Act that you mentioned. And here it really specifies how the government has the duty of doing this. On every other countries that signed this act in 2006, Mexico being one of them, and as well as they are not doing it with the general public, with women in general. They are not doing with women into the neurodiverse group, and they don't attend their needs. On April to 2015, 2015, there was a general law for care and protection of people with the autism spectrum condition. But this law was signed for giving social programs for inclusion. What I mean is that the government was signed off for giving social programs for autism people and other neurodiverse people to access to, I don't know, jobs, better education, healthcare, and a way to, and that, but that's not a good approach. Why? Because they made this, law to say, neurodiverse people needs help, but we don't know how to help them. But we think they need to be incorporated in society, but that's it. They not see it as they need rights. They need human rights. They don't see it like that. The Mexican government sees the neurodiverse people a person that might need a social, how to say that? A social incorporation. They need help to be incorporated into jobs and educations, but they don't do much about it. They don't take into consideration a new education structure to provide help and to provide a normal education for neurodiverse people. They're just trying to incorporate them in society, but without much effort. In November 2019, there was a General for Medical Health initiative, but it wasn't good. The next one, please. Because in words of Carlos Rio Espinosa, the senior researcher and attorney in the Human Rights Watch Division of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, he said about this initiative that was taken in 2019, Mexico keeps the old biomedical paradigm of mental health, and this initiative does not propose anything new. It even legitimizes private centers for the hospitalization of people with special mental health conditions. What I mean is that in Mexico, in general, as I said before, the neurodiverse people are not right holders, and they see this initiative as legitimized centers for hospitalization and taking out the rights for the neurodiverse people. So now that I gave you this perspective of how things are going in Mexico, we give you the word to my fellow group member, Yukari.
Thanks for that, Daniela. Thanks all for being here. Can we put the next one, please? Thanks. I'll be quick because of the time, but just not for that. Maybe we know that Mexican government is that interesting about this subject. Maybe the Mexican government don't have intersectional perspective, maybe don't have on his mind that topic is very difficult to avoid and needs results right now. So the creation of the public policies with an intersectional perspective is necessary. About the violence against neurodiverse group in reproductive health is not late. When we will talk about that make us not even have records is not a coincidence. This is related to an internal structural fail. So, in the Mexican government don't have this vision to help this group of people. So really needs an intersectional perspective. Can we put the next one, please? Like this slide says, we need a system that truly protects human rights, not just talk about it. That maybe is a topic that we discuss in, like, I don't know, ONU, in like another system, international, but don't really work in here, in the territory, in the nation. So our system has a noticeable fragmentation, which does not protect all human beings, such as women or the neurodiverse brains. Can we please, the next one, please? This creates violence and discrimination against them, denying them primary rights such as access like abortion, legal termination of pregnancy to reduce inequalities, sex education to know and decide, period products to dignify the lifestyle, or reproductive rights in general, like to stop to violence obstetric, and maybe just all the rights in general. Coupled with the collective stigma of conservative Catholic society in the country, we were with more prejudice on the issue that guarantee human rights and dignify the life according to their needs. And that's the issue in all. We can see it everywhere in our society. They are minimized. In the health sector, they are ignored. In general, the state condemns them to a precariousness and economic vulnerability, eliminated their reproductive rights. So this is all. In general, the state don't care about the neurodiverse brains, don't care about vulnerable groups, don't care about women, and in the territory is all needs reproductive rights, needs access to abortion, needs sex education integral, need period products to have to a dignified lifestyle. So I have to say the word to the next one is Sheila. So thank you for being here and listen.
Oh, I think you may be muted, Shayla.
Yeah, you're muted, Shay.
I don't see it. Sorry. Okay. I like this phrase that you are saying now. What is not named, it doesn't exist. And the context we go through in Mexico is a clear example of this, especially when we talk about the different realities that neurodivergent people face. Along with this, in Mexico, we have a lack of sexual and reproductive justice perspective and well monitoring. An example of this is the menstrual poverty. In Mexico, the next one, please. In Mexico, there are 63 million women at menstruating age. It's estimated that during our lives, we menstruate around 7 consecutive years. This represents an expenditure on period management products of 1,180 euros. Considering that the wage gap in Mexico is 84% of the 100% that a man earns, it's necessary to recognize that the expense on the pin race is impressive. Recalling the phrase from the beginning, in Mexico, there is even no official data about homeless people. Even less, how many of these people are neurodivergent. That is where we see we observe an existent lack of interest. And just this year, a census was conducted. This census was prepared due to the pressure from the civil society. Science, they are the ones who make possible for these issues to be added to the public agenda. Therefore, we need a participatory society that evolves within these realities through an empathic vision and even more towards neurodivergent people. The next, please. A few months ago, I was analyzing the menstrual poverty problem that we have here in Mexico. And can you change the other, please? Okay, yeah. The menstrual poverty problem. So I conducted a campaign called Menstruation on the Streets, where we provide homeless and vulnerable situation people of menstrual management products. Also, to position the importance of menstrual education in all the sectors within public agenda, essentially for naturalizing the menstruation. Science is something that has been a taboo here in our country for many years. Because of this, the next please. Because of this, it's necessary to take actions that lead us to position the context of neurodivergent people, and even more in a context of sexual and reproductive justice. I think that the first step is inform ourselves about it. And the second step, make the problem visible and take joint actions. Third step, and the most important for me, always with empathic vision, because this is the only way to make it visible and name it. So let's do it for them. And in the picture that you saw in the next slides, you saw that we made this campaign for not just for help the people or for speak about it also, because like I say, for many times here in Mexico, the menstruation, it was a taboo. When you hear menstruation, the people become afraid from them. So this campaign, it was too good for search to the people that this is natural, that is from us, that is from our bodies, and we don't have to be afraid or ashamed for this. It's something natural. And also, it's something that all the women have. Also, the women that are on a vulnerable situation. This vision, like intersectional, is very important now. And now we are the person, now we are the society that have to involve within and speak about it, like the other speakers say. We have to speak about it, because if we don't speak, if we don't inform about it, it's gonna be like the same. If the others don't do it, if the government here in Mexico don't do it, we will do. And now we are in a fighting for this, a dignified menstruation in Mexico and in all the world, I think, because it's from us, it's natural. It has not to be a taboo. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of that, all of you speakers. That was absolutely incredible. And just kind of jumping off of this before Grace is going to tell you about our next events before we go into some questions. I just wanted to say, reiterate what Shayla was saying. We really are this next generation of intersectional feminists, and we're the ones who are making this next change. And period poverty is so important, something that's really never discussed. So in light of that, in mid-March, Girl Up Edinburgh and a whole host of international partners, we are running an international lobbying day to address period poverty. So if you are interested in that as an individual or with your organization, feel free to reach out to Girl Up Edinburgh on social media if you want to partake in that change. Grace?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really brilliant to hear from everyone and so insightful, and it's so important that we just keep broadening and deepening our perspectives. So with that in mind, I'd love to invite you all to our next event next Tuesday. We are having a cocktail queens evening with the Econ Women Group. So our cocktail of the night is named after America's first Black economist, Sadie T.M. Alexander. She aimed to champion economic inclusion and justice despite being denied the ability to practice in the pre-civil rights era. But despite this, she continued to use her expertise to recommend better policies for working class, such as the federal jobs guarantee, which remains a foundational concept in politics. So please join us to raise a glass to these inspirational women who have come before us, and it'd be really great to see you all there. Following on from that, we have yoga, a lovely way to ease into February, and like Shira mentioned, the next event will be on the 9th of February. So I guess we'll just open up the floor to some questions. Feel free to pop on your camera or your microphone or pop them in the chat bar.
Well, I have a question. I can break the ice a little. And this is for everyone, for all of our speakers. I guess I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the most misunderstood? We were talking a lot about how these stereotypes really shape out a lot of how neurodiverse women have to mask and have to act. So I was wondering, what are some of these judgments or stereotypes that you felt were the most prominent in your life, and how did you get around it?
I'll go. So I probably have only found out really that I had autism about 2 years ago. Was the big moment where I was like, oh yeah, I have this. It's been an interesting one. I think the general stereotype is that we're not likable people, that we're dislikable, that we're antisocial. The Sheldon Cooper stereotype is the best one that I can think of. We're consistently misrepresented in the media. I think the big one though is just we're not really seen as human. A man at a party, after I told him I had autism, looked at me dead in the eye and said, "But you're too pretty to have autism." So I think that pretty much categorizes how little is known about autism and how much we are still relational beings. We don't just want to sit in our rooms on our own. We want to be with other people. We want to spend time with other people. We just need the space and the time to be shown how, and to have the education, and to be brought up in a safe environment that won't traumatize us and lead to later neurological issues like depression and anxiety. So yeah, there's that. If you guys have any other questions about autism, do just drop them in the chat.
I have one, I think. I haven't seen a lot in media that autism is a condition that is being only shown that men have it, and the reason why my question is, what do you think the media only show men having autism and is not spread more about autism in women?
I think the reason why the media only shows autistic autistic men is because mainly autistic men have been the only ones who have been studied within science. I mean, like, if you want to look it up, medical research up for autistic women, there's really literally nothing. And also, we're typecast as the funny, awkward one, and men very much easily can, you know, like they still come off likable to some extent. I think any woman who behaves in an antisocial way is considered a pain or a nuisance or difficult. So not only are we battling the problem of like it just women represented in general, it's how women are supposed to behave in general. And yeah, Hollywood and the TV media industry is terrible. However, I do have a recommendation for everyone. If you do want to learn about more women in autism, there's a thing called Hannah Gatsby. She's a comedian. She's so funny, and she will categorize autism for you perfectly. So she is about the only good representation of autism within media, but she did have to get her own Netflix special for that. So yeah, anyone else want to ask a question? Sam?
Hello. So first of all, loved both the presentations, thought they were very informative, and I learned a lot. My question is, given how difficult and sometimes costly it can be to get diagnosed with autism or any other kind of neurodivergent difference, especially for women and people in gender minorities, you know, transgender people, non-binary people, what advice would you give to, you know, a friend or a colleague or family member or anyone who came to you and said that they might be neurodivergent, but they didn't know kind of what to do?
It's a good question. That actually did happen to me at a party pre-COVID. And someone was like, hey, how do you go through the process of getting diagnosed? And the honest to God truth is there isn't really one. There isn't an easy process. You have to really start with your GP. But again, GPs are it's incredibly variable what kind of GP you get. Psychiatrist maybe, but again, some psychiatrists are not well versed. It took me 3 attempts, and this is the ones which started in 2019. This isn't the ones that started in 2008 to be able to get a diagnosis, because there's such stigma and stereotypes around, you know, being autistic, being neurodivergent. I'd start with basically, if you want to really see how you are, go on social media platforms. I know that that's like a controversial thing to say, but I would say social media platforms actually are at the cutting edge of representation, and find what you find relatable on there, and then go from there. Then go to your GP, then go to, you know, whoever's next. Hanya, am I saying that right? Did you have a question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, sorry, there is sound there. I have a question about your experience from your country, because I have ADHD, and when I realized that I had ADHD, I started looking for information, but here in Mexico, it's too difficult to find information, and later I found this concept now, neurodiverse, and I say, oh, where's that now? And I started looking up, and here in Mexico, we don't have like a real movement about neurodiverse and about all the diagnoses that englobes neurodiverse. What do you think about that?
I think, firstly, I'm really sorry that you're going through that, because I know that it's an incredibly lonely process, and being a woman and being neurodivergent is incredibly difficult because it is extremely lonely and extremely frightening. In terms of the movement, I mean, we're really just kicking off. I mean, we're in a new social justice movement, which has suddenly come to the forefront. I didn't really realize there was anything, but social media, that is literally where to go. I mean, TikTok, I think you guys have TikTok, is something that I've just discovered, and I think it's great. I would say, I mean, it's incredibly difficult. I only know one other woman who has autism. And I don't know how many people you know who have ADHD, but in a slightly weird side note, if you want to chat sometime, my name's Anna Crean. You can just look me up on Facebook. Maybe we could talk about neurodiverse things together. But I'd say, like, we found each other, so there will be more of us. It is just about putting feelers out on the web. I am currently too scared to come out as autistic on TikTok. This is the first time I've talked about my autism publicly. As Grace knows, when I told her that I was autistic, I broke down in tears and my very good looking history teacher walked past. And as he walked past, I said, but nobody likes autistic people. So this is, yeah, I know, but that was the stereotype I had in my own head. And then, you know, as you learn, as you grow, as you change, you know, you learn to become more self-accepting. It's a journey, like with anything with our identities, it's a journey. So if you want to chat, drop me a message. I'd love to have a conversation. There's one in the...
Sorry, just to bump in there. So yeah, I have ADHD, and, you know, I think the hardest thing, I think something to recognize, especially being as a woman, we're really taught, you know, not to trust yourself. That we're taught that nice equals good. So if you just act like you're okay, then you're okay. So I think one of the biggest things for me was saying, okay, like recognizing that, you know, I'm finding something that's challenging that I used to not find challenging. And that's not because there's something, you know, internally, you know, perpetually wrong with me, you know, and it has nothing to do with your self-worth as well. And I think that when we're with women too, that's also another issue because of patriarchy. So just remember to trust yourself. That's what I would say.
Thank you both. I want to say something more. I think that the movement isn't too strong enough. I think that it's getting melodic into social media, no?
Sorry, you might cut out like at the last second. What was the final 3 words?
Oh, that I think that the movement haven't get strong. Like it's starting as a movement. I know that Diagnose have a lot of time, but as a movement of finding each other and which we are here talking about is starting. So I think that it's important to starting to do more things like this and to get involved.
Yeah, it's definitely starting, and we have a long way to go. I mean, the whole neurodivergent community needs to work together to make this at the forefront of both policy change and cultural change. There was one which was like in the group chat, which wasn't directed at me, but it was directed at, I think it was directed at BUAP. And it was, what do you think the most challenging thing about being a woman and talking about neurodiversity or woman in poverty? Is it true that little is known about the spectrums of health and what it's like to live with that many stereotypes? Do you guys, so is it true that little, sorry, I'm reading again. Is it true that little is known about the spectrums of health and what it's like to live with so many stereotypes? Yeah, little is known. I mean, I think we don't, I mean, like, if you want to be diagnosed with autism, you make up 1% of the population. If you want to be diagnosed as a woman with autism, you make up the 1% of the 1%. So you're a special mythical creature. And if you're gay like me, we're the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. So yeah, we live with a lot of stereotypes. We don't have, I mean, like, female autism doesn't have stereotypes. We're just lumped in with the kind of like, oh, you're just an antisocial woman and we don't want to spend time with you. And that's like more of a patriarchy issue. I mean, like, once things actually start developing, then we'll have more of a chat about the stereotypes that we get. But currently we don't even really have stereotypes. We're just sort of like signed off as, you know, annoying and not wanted. So yeah, like Shira said, trust yourself, make some space for yourself, and, you know, give yourself a voice. Any other questions?
Well, if that's it, this was absolutely lovely. I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. This was a really incredible collaboration, and I love when, you know, we bring international experiences and we're looking at things from different perspectives and different, you know, geographic locations. Grace and Shresa, do you guys have anything else you want to add? And honor and other Grace, anything else you want to?
No, you go, Grace.
I would just like to say thank you so much to all of our speakers. It was so great to gain a more diverse perspective on these things, and really just kind of forefront how important these things are. And like Honor and Hania said, you know, this is the start of a movement, and there's a long way to go, but the fact we're speaking about these things is is really great. So thank you so much for all your comments tonight.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate on what Grace has said, and also just draw our attention to the fact that, you know, despite the pandemic and despite us being cooped in our rooms and not being able to go to university and kind of have those life experiences we want to have, we were able to do this and connect with people from across the globe and get a sense of people like Anna and like the girls at kind of like the girls at Girl Up Mexico, and yeah, and just understand more. So I'm really appreciative to everyone for that, and thank you everyone.
One final thing, if you guys want the recording of this, it's going to be out in the next week. So we're going to send it off to our very lovely editor. So if you guys want to listen back to this, send it to your friends. Look us up on Facebook or Instagram. It's just the Espresso series. And we have our Buzzsprout linked, which will take you to whatever your choice of mainstream streaming service, like iTunes, Apple Music, SoundCloud. I think there's Google Play or something now. So if you guys want to send this out afterwards, we'll get it edited for you and you can go and listen to it whenever you feel like. And thank you very much for all the support, because it's the first time I've spoken about autism publicly and you guys have been lovely. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your experiences. We really appreciate it. And we are looking forward to seeing you all next week for Cocktail Queens with